arguably the best Super Coupe you can buy for the money right now in terms of all-round performance. That's what I want to find out today. But this is the rear-wheel drive model and not the X-Drive model, and right now conditions are greasy. So let's hope we don't crash. Cool. So what is the F82 M4 like to drive? Well, it's definitely got some character to it. You know, if you want an M car, make no mistake, this is still an M car. But things have changed here. We've got a new power plant, we've got an S58, we've got bucket loads for power, but the torque delivery is now different. Whilst the S55 used to sort of punch you from below, straight from low revs, now we've got sort of that surge feeling chasing the top end. It's definitely a different feeling. One that kind of does take away a bit of the drama, but then it does add a whole load of capability. The M4 has really sorted out that rear geometry. You know, we've got now even better rear suspension and even wider track on the rear, and that means more grip. Don't get me wrong, if you're a bit naughty with the throttle, you know, you can misbehave, but you can also keep a really nice, neat sort of line. And I think this would definitely appeal to the more track enthusiasts. Yeah, my heart is still racing regardless of driving this car. But yeah, I will say I do miss some of that sort of just that animalistic character that the S55 had. But what you do gain is a lovely cabin, a nice daily. You know, not to say the previous gen was a horrible daily, but this has definitely got better prospects going for it. Is it double the car? I mean, now second-hand market, you can get these, being a rear-wheel drive model, for about £48,000, £50,000, cool, shall we call it? But then you can get an F82 M4, a decent one, for about 25. So is it double the price? Yes. Is it double the car? No, not really. So, you know, 25k is a lot of money. That's literally 2 previous gen M4s. And whilst you do retain a lot of power now, I just think out of the box it's missing something. And for the double the money, should you really be feeling like you're compensating? I'm not too sure.
And that's not the only controversial part of the M4 competition.
Pig nose M4, I understand. That is the problem with the G series M3 and M4. Everyone bitched about the styling, but to be quite frank, BMW did that intentionally. They wanted to stir up the pot. They wanted to get you guys talking. That's BMW M for you nowadays. I think nowadays they take it a bit too far, but this was the sort of era where they thought, let's play around with the design. And two, you know what? I think they've succeeded. I think the M4 is still a really aggressive car. Okay, it might not be as pretty, and it might not be as beautiful as the F82 M4, but safe to say, I think it's still a good looking car. It's the rear end of the M4 for me that doesn't really do it. You see, the M3, its sibling, has much wider hips. It's got whack, yeah? This, you can see from the rear quarter, it's not as defined. And therefore, that means it just lacks that bit of road presence that the M3 has. Let's get on the power now. That's 4k revs. Now the boost comes in. It takes the bumps really well. They've really ironed out the suspension. Again, harsh bumps on these roads, the car takes it really well. Another thing, we've now got adjustable brakes. This whole M1, M2 setup is really fantastic. You know, you can really, there's a lot of adjustability, and in general, that is sort of what you'd expect nowadays for something that you pay, what, about £90,000? £90,000, it's a lot of money, guys. The M4 has become a very expensive car, but I think that's the reason why it's taken this sort of direction. I think they're really aiming for a more super GT kind of vibe rather than a really raw thoroughbred sports car like the previous gen might have been. Has the M4 lost a bit of its sparkle? Arguably yes, and that's down to the 8-speed ZF gearbox in this. Gone is the 7-speed MDCT, and now we've got a ZF automatic, obviously to deal with all that torque from the S58, understandably. The S58 in question makes 510 horsepower and 650 Nm of torque, so definitely big boy numbers. But it's just the fact that we've lost a bit of emotion. That DCT was just super razor sharp with the gear shifts, whereas this 8-speed ZF, it just provides more of a computerized sort of experience with the M4. You can definitely tell they've really tried to cater towards a more daily drivable prospect, a more sort of super GT, rather than a bona fide maniac sports car compared to what the last car was like. That being said, you know, this being the rear-wheel drive model, I think the traction is immense. So whilst you don't get any of that fishtail stuff that you might expect, you do get immense confidence in return. You can really just throw this car in second, third gear on boost and not a problem. As you can see, the traction in this car is really impressive. That's DSC off, you know, and it's just hooking. One thing I will say though, with the S58, as punchy as it is, it does sort of have a torque deficit down low. I think that's to do with the mapping. I don't know, it just seems like there's a lot of turbo lag initially just down low, whereas the S55 in its nature, it just dumped you with all that sort of boost, and you know, overexcite the rear wheels. This, understandably, you know, it's not sort of aiming to be that kind of car. It wants to be a lot more driver focused, but a lot more drivable. I think BMW M are trying to market this car for potentially your less sort of average driver. You know, the car's very safe. You know, you can get a lot of angle, but it really does look after you. But yeah, you do have to commit with that throttle if you do want to over sort of step the rear. Whereas the F82 M4, it was just effortless. You know, you'd really sort of use that old school turbocharging feeling. Whereas this, you kind of do have to anticipate it coming on boost, and then you get your power. You know, I'm sure with a downpipe and a tune, I've heard ridiculous figures, potentially 700 horsepower with just software alone. I think that's ridiculous. You know, the fact that without an upgraded turbo, without upgraded fueling, that you can achieve such big numbers. You know, it's crazy what modern performance cars have come to. You know, I still think a 300 horsepower car is very fast. To think that this is not enough for people out of the box and they go and tune these is ridiculous, honestly. But I don't blame them as well at the same time. The S58 is an incredible power plant, one that is not even halfway near its capabilities. You know, we've literally seen 6-7 second, you know, we're aiming for sort of 6 seconds with the S58. They've just cracked 7. You know, it's very, very impressive what this sort of drivetrain can do.
And that's not the only thing impressive about the G82.
Inside of the G series BMW M cars, I think it's definitely agreeable that there is no sort of mistake made here. It's much better than the previous gen in terms of quality, design and technology. You know, we've got a digital speedometer with the iDrive 7, the best iDrive in my opinion. Not to mention, we've got carbon inlays, of course, as you expect from a high performance car. Talking about high performance, we've got these seats. Again, it's a bit of a crime if you don't spec the beautiful carbon fiber bucket seats. These comfort seats are good and supportive, but when you just know something like that out there exists, you just know you're just a bit of a lethargic prick to choose the comfort seats. All right, well, fair enough, I am a skinny twat, but guys, those carbon buckets are to die for. In general, the quality of the material is just really good, but again, to be expected of a 90k car. We've got ambient lighting as well. So whilst people may be fussy about previous gen and this gen in terms of design on the outside, it's safe to say they've really nailed it with the interior. I think the main focus of the M4 of this generation is the fact that you can just click M1, you know, traction and everything back on. You can just really relax. Now we're just chilling in traffic. You know, the car's not even going to be that thirsty. And yeah, it's just rather comfortable. The suspension is actually quite supple when everything's lacked off. I will say the brakes can be a bit grabby, but that's also one improvement as well. I think the brakes are even stronger with this generation. BMW M have always been known to be a bit finicky in terms of their braking performance, but the F series and now the G series, their brakes are definitely fixed. Yeah, in general, the M4 M4, you can definitely tell it's a car that you take to the shops. Of course, the old M4 you can live it with it daily, but with UK conditions always being sort of damp and bumpy, they've definitely sort of focused on how to relax in an M4 as opposed to rather it being such an all-out performing sports car. But yeah, quite frankly, I'm impressed in terms of the daily ability of the M4. But again, it's just for me, I don't know. I think the BMW audience typically are people that buy these, because they want that out of the ordinary sort of spiky feeling drive. They want to feel on edge at the end of the day. And whilst the performance is impressive with the G82 M4, I do think a piece of that is missing. Maybe that piece is given in the higher models like the CS or the CSL. I wouldn't know. I haven't driven those models yet. Hopefully one day. But I can say this: the M4 is definitely a very good Super GT, and that can still be a bit naughty if you really want it to be. But just don't expect it if you're going, especially from an F82 M4 to a G82, to have that same sort of wild beast character. So what do I think about the BMW M4 Competition? Well, in terms of the G series, they've definitely improved a lot on all-going performance and how you put it down onto the floor. The S58 provides an immense amount of power, and combined with that rear geometry, that new rear axle, it can really put the power down. But as a consequence, you really do feel a lack of drama nowadays with this car. Compared to the F82 M4, where it was a low-end spiky beast, this is a different sort of character and different sort of drive. This is for more of usable performance and potentially track times, as opposed to the F82 M4, where you go for a blast down a road, a very challenging drive, and again, very satisfying drive. If you guys enjoyed the video, please like, share and subscribe. For now, I've been Carmadnab. Peace.